yesterday. Apparently has things to do. So I'm here. Welcome everybody to the September edition of the Nevada chapter of the International Association's Lunch and Learn. We have a wonderful presentation for you today on Courtroom Demeanor that will be delivered by our own Chief Deputy District Attorney, Nell Christensen. A couple quick little things. Food right over there, serve yourself as needed. There's beverages in the cooler. The training staff also let me know that just outside here and to the left is a little fridge with water and juice and stuff like that if you want to partake in any of those amenities. Out the door, past the lobby on your left are the bathrooms if you need the facilities. And a couple other housekeeping options. We have the annual training conference that's coming up in November. I put some flyers up here on the front desk. Please register if you plan on attending. It's going to be great. Chief Keenan set up a bunch of great instructors for us for that conference, and take a flyer to help remind you. Other than that, that's all I got. I will turn it over to District Attorney Christensen.
Thank you so much. Thanks you guys for coming today. So I am willing to bet money that there's nobody in this room who took on this job, law enforcement or investigations or otherwise, with your dream being to testify in court. This is not usually what our law enforcement partners are excited about. They're usually dreading it, actually. And as you guys might know, public speaking is one of the number one, I think it is the number one fear of American adults. So it's even worse to be subject to cross-examination on tough questions about how you suck at your job in front of a bunch of people, in front of a crowded courtroom. And so I know that this isn't necessarily what you're that excited about, but I'm here to tell you that it's one of the most important things you need to know how to do to follow through with your investigations. You put forth a lot of effort for your investigations. I'm sure most of the lunch and learns are about that, about the specifics and details of investigations. But you're only as good as what we can deliver in court in terms of seeing this through. And so that's why it's important for us to talk about this. I actually am here because Kevin came and saw a presentation that I did for Metro. I do a lot of different presentations around with our law enforcement partners because my job for the last 10 years of my career has been doing training. So I train our new attorneys. I do our recruiting. So I train and work with our interns. And I also am a teacher at the law school. I actually teach as an adjunct. I teach trial advocacy. So I'm teaching the people who are going to be cross-examining you in 3 or 4 years in my classes. So this is actually my 20th year at the DA's office. I'm going to have my anniversary. Actually, it's today. No, it's Friday, 9/29. 9/29 is my anniversary with the DA's office, 20 years. The first 10 years of my career, I spent in court. I was, as you guys might know, if you've interacted with some of us, like we are in court. I've handled thousands of hearings, trials, grand juries, witnesses, different kinds of things that are happening in court. So I did that for about 10 years. Some of you guys, I probably have interacted with in that capacity. I handled a lot of cases where a lot of the cases that I ended up doing towards the end of my litigation career was murder cases because I was the chief of the gun crimes team. Our gun crimes unit is handling a lot of our murders, even though there might not necessarily be a gun involved. Like maybe the body is dead by gunshot, but then the body is burned, or the scene is Ryan is calling. The scene is burnt. So I might have, some of you guys that are old school, I might have had you on some of those cases. I also was one of the prosecutors on the Luxor bombing case. ATF, fire, every law enforcement agency in the county was at that scene. So I had interacted with some of you guys on that probably. Through that time, being in court constantly, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of testimony, of our law enforcement partners being really strong, being really good on the stand, and being pretty terrible on the stand. So I kind of have seen that and I know that, but I think the last 10 years of my career doing training has helped me even more to be able to train on this because I have been sitting essentially not as an attorney watching you as the witness, but instead as a juror or a judge would be. Because we're sitting there watching people practice. We're doing moot courts. Like a lot of the training that we do for some of the other academies in town is we do moot courts. We put them through the ringer. We even do this for like Metro Homicide, where we'll do a direct and then a cross. And you kind of get to feel what that feels like from a really skilled cross examiner. So I've seen how that looks from a juror's perspective. And I think I've learned more about this, and some of the things that I bring to you today are from that perspective of a person who is having to listen and absorb the stuff that you're talking about. So I have worked with people who were experts at this and have spent hours and hours on the witness stand. Some of these guys up here are people that like Dean O'Kelly, an amazing homicide detective during his career, great on the stand. I'll give you a secret. These guys still get nervous before they go on the stand. So don't let that deter you from going in there and getting that practice, because the way that you're going to get better is by practicing. Every expert was once a beginner, right? There was a day when you guys didn't know how to investigate fire. So at some point in your life, you didn't even know how to do that, and now you are experts at it. Same thing with testimony. You're going to have to practice to get good at it. So the first thing we're going to do with this presentation is I have a video. It's not my video. I actually got it from DPS. It's a little example of what court might look like, and we're going to watch it. And I want you guys to think about and note down some things that you thought he did well, our witness, how he did well, and some things that maybe he didn't do so well. And we'll talk about it after we watch the video. And okay.
Some scumbag, the wheels of justice are gonna roll on you today, from you in my state. They try to win this one, wouldn't they? Say, glad to see you can make it today. How are you doing? Looking good. Hey, how are you doing today? Folks, how you doing back there? They can see you today. Right? How you doing today?
Mr. Savage, please rise.
Yes, I'm.
You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help God.
First, I do.
Officer Savage, would you please relate to the court what you observed on the evening of September 21st at 8 o'clock?
Yes, it's all right there in my report.
This is your report.
Yes, that's my report.
Do you mind reading your report for the court?
Certainly, certainly. Saw drunk, arrested sane.
That's it?
Of course, that's it. It's all there.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Savage? The report indicates that you arrested the defendant in the city. In the city? The report says in the county. In the city, going to the county. Yeah, I remember it pretty well. It was a golden bright morning. I was in the city going out to the county. The sun was rising. At 8 p.m. in the evening, the sun was rising. The sun was going down. It was a golden evening. I was in the city going out to the county. Your Honor, it's obvious from the testimony.
So, case dismissed.
School graduate, huh, kid? You know, I just don't know how these guys can lose an airtight case. It's unfortunate he doesn't have any police experience. Come on, kid, let's go on. But
I always wonder what he's going to go out and do right there. That was cuts off right there. And I'm like, what is that? Okay, so what do you guys think? I have some prizes for people that give me some things, some examples of what you thought was good or bad about our friend's testimony.
Have any of the basic government.
Right. And that has to do, okay, you know what? I'm gonna give you some nerds because you are the nerd who first raises your hand. And I love nerds. That's an award for sure. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, and what does that reflect on? That reflects on his report, right? Because your report is a gift to your future self. You will have no idea when you have to testify about this case. If it's in a trial, it could be years from now. How many more things have you done since then? How many more cases have you investigated since that? So you have to give yourself your cheat sheet. You have to give yourself all that information in your report. So one of our biggest problems that we see that affects testimony negatively is a report that doesn't have everything that we need to have in it. And you're talking about the W's: who, what, when, where, why, how, and details. So we need that in the report for sure, and in your testimony. So he would also need a report to prepare from to remind himself about that. Okay, what else? Absolutely. I think that's probably you get a DA stress ball or a DA stress squeezer. It's not a ball exactly, it's a star. It's a badge. Okay. So yeah, I mean, in this case, our buddy did not write a good report. So it really would not have helped him to have reviewed that thing. I mean, actually it would have helped him a little bit because he wouldn't have been like lying on the stand, which we saw him kind of do, like guessing and making stuff up as he went. But in reality, that's the biggest thing about testimony is you will have done the investigation. You will have done the report that does your future self the favor. There will be photos. There will be things that you will review. And that reflects very well on the witness who's testifying. If they know everything and they just know it like that, let's say they even know the exact time of arrival, or they know details that you wouldn't necessarily everybody remember. That just looks very polished. That looks like you were super on it, and that improves your credibility. When you are so together that you know all those little details just like that. I've seen sometimes when our partners testify and they have the event number and they've memorized it. I don't expect that, but if they do that, it just looks really, really good. And there was a question. Yes. And so that's another thing that we are combating and we'll talk about is there isn't a nice, happy, lovey-dovey, warm and fuzzy feeling about law enforcement right now. And so when you're testifying, you really are testifying as almost like a spokesperson for law enforcement, a spokesperson for your department. And it reflects on not just you and not just this case, but on the entire department, agency, wherever you're from. And I'll tell you what, I have a lot of people that when they start out and we're picking them out for the jury and they're kind of talking crap and talking about negative interactions with law enforcement and everything, they watch our trials and afterwards they leave with a deep respect for what you do because they can see it. And normally we have people who we have prepared to, like I wouldn't put that guy on the stand cold, right? I would do a pre-trial with him and I would help him prepare. Let's go through your report. Here's some of the questions that I'm going to ask you. Here's some of the questions that the defense is going to ask you. And it's going to go, pretty smooth. And it's going to, you're going to improve the public perception of law enforcement. Okay, what else? I have other candy and other things in here to give out. So yeah. Really good point. I think like when you're testifying, You get a big bear hug, a gummy bear hug. When you are, and you guys will be, I mean, this is even more paramount for you when you're testifying as an expert. Your credibility is going to be even more of a big deal in the case and more at issue. And so these kinds of things, the report writing is going to be like vital and for you to have prepared and know it. What else about this guy though? He's no expert. I'll tell you that. Yes. Right. The second he walked in through the door of the courtroom, right? The second he walked in through the door of the courtroom, lemon heads for you. He saunters, right? And we want you to walk in confidently, like you did a good job and you're respectable, but you don't walk in like, you know, with that kind of an ego. And it just from the beginning, and usually I do a little part of this where I walk in the door, so we do a little reenactment, but I can't get there with this blockage here. But what I'll say is, when you guys walked in this room today, you looked at me and you said, "Who is this? What do we got today? You know, who is this person that's going to be talking to us for the next couple hours?" Right? That's just human nature. So when you walk in through that door, all eyes are on you. All eyes all of a sudden turn to you to see, like, what do we got? And they start judging you immediately. Is that fair? No, but is that life and reality? Yes. They're going to start judging you immediately. So he walks in and he's got a swagger that is not professional. He also, and this is part of what you were saying, he sits down in the witness stand and just like sitting there kind of like slouched down on the witness stand. How professional does that look? Am I ready, ready to testify in a professional, respectful to this court and to this proceeding and to the defendant who's charged with a crime where maybe he's going to be doing time in prison? Is that effective? No. So there's a lot of things about his demeanor that we saw that were problematic, for sure. What else? Do I have another nerd in the room? Or do I have another stressed out person in the room? Yes.
Just because he said, I don't think he did anything.
Okay.
He did anything.
I think there are a couple good things. Try to brainstorm with me.
Well, he showed up in uniform.
Yeah, and that's a double-edged sword. Somebody said uniform. Okay. So for me, he shows up appropriately attired. Okay. He showed up in a manner that I thought was what I would expect somebody to show up from who's an officer, who's a street cop. Okay. If I am pre-trialing, I will give the person information about how I want them to show up. I like it when people show up in character. So like these like uniforms that you guys have on today, that's how I would want you to show up if it were my case, because I like the jury to be able to look at you and know what you are, know who you are, and be able to identify you visually as what character in this play that they're looking at. Some other, like if it's a homicide detective, they're going to show up in a suit. And they're going to look like, they call it a monkey suit because they never wear those except for when they have to testify. They're going to wear those. They're going to look like $1 million, right? It kind of depends on what your role is. But I think that was one positive. He was, I guess we could argue about whether he's appropriately groomed. I'm looking at some of the other like 70s cop looking guys here. We can argue about that, but I think he was appropriate. I think that was something that was positive. Another positive. Yeah, and I don't know that was in his case a positive. Like I didn't think that came off very well, but I'd rather have you be a little bit actually meek than act like that. Quite honestly, because that's just everybody's gonna hate you from the get-go. What is another positive? You're looking over here. I know you have something. I know you're stressed. That's true. He didn't. Oh, sorry. Right past you. He didn't get argumentative. He didn't exactly have a chance to because he was on for such a little time, but that was a positive. I also think he was loud enough. So we'll sometimes have witnesses that are just like barely here. And that just looks like you're not confident. So that was, I really don't see that many more positives from him. But what else do we have that's a negative? What else do we have from that? Well, and the problem with that was like lack of preparation, but really what he started doing how many of you guys, by the way, have testified before by a show of hands? Okay. So how many times have you on the stand maybe forgotten something from your report or it's not like, I'll ask you a question like, and what was the exact time of arrival? And you're like, I don't know. Why are you asking me that? That's so stupid. Why do you even need to know that? Right in the back of your mind. But we ask that all the time because we want to tell the story to the jury. And then that's okay. I mean, sometimes you're not going to know every single little thing. But he, what did he do instead of saying like, I don't remember? Started making up. Can't have that. No, that's like perjury, basically. I mean, you know, he knows that he doesn't know what he's talking about. So we never want you to guess. And this is something that I say to lay witnesses too, if we're prepping them. I'll be like, listen, all you need to do is tell the truth. It's that easy. And if you don't remember, say you don't remember. And if you don't know, we need you to say you don't know. Don't guess. Because that's speculation. Have you guys ever been on the stand and they say, objection, speculation? We can't actually have testimony about that. How many of you guys, just so I understand the audience, how many of you guys have testified at a jury trial in front of a jury? How many of you guys have testified at a grand jury? And then how many of you guys have testified at like a preliminary hearing with just the judge, the justice of the peace? Okay, so we have like a kind of sprinkling of a lot of different kinds. How many of you guys have testified in like more than 10 jury trials? Okay, so we just have the retired one who's done that because that's what over the course of a career. And I'd say, you know, if I had only done 10 jury trials in my career, I am still a baby. And so I'm sure that, you know, this is somebody who we aspire to be like, somebody who had a long career in this area, and he still probably has growth, could probably continue to evolve and grow in, you know, how he is on the stand. What else? I'm sure you're still getting subs. You're still getting called back for other old cases, I bet. Retrials. Did you testify in Luxor, by the way? Okay. Yeah, okay. So many. Okay, another thing on him. Anybody have another one? Because there's other stuff that I got. What about like we talked a little bit about the demeanor, but maybe I want to go a little more deep on that. Like, how do we just walk into the courtroom and start like broing out with everybody you see in there, right? No, we walk directly up to the witness stand. We're there for business, right? We're not there to socialize. So he's like talking to people in the audience. He's like threatening the defendant. He's talking to the jury and the judge. None of that. You don't even make eye contact with me. Okay. You don't even make eye contact with the DA or the prosecutor as you walk up to the stand. You have a job to do, and it's get your butt up to the witness stand. Now, what did he do when he got up to the witness stand that showed that he has no clue? What's the first thing you're supposed to do when you get up there? If you ever know anything about court, you know, remain standing and raise your right hand to be sworn. The clerk is going to say that to you. Instead, like that guy just sits down. He looks like he doesn't know what he's doing. Now, what we want, you guys are actually kind of like professional observers, you know, professional witnesses. So a professional witness, and I know that's not what you think of yourselves as because you guys are like, you know, doing fire investigations and that's what your focus is, but like really that is what you are in terms of this case. You are a professional witness. So you got to look the part. You got to look like you know what you're doing and like you've done this before. Even if you haven't, you fake it till you make it. And that's why we're doing this training. So you get up there and you stand and you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God. And then you sit down in an appropriate way. Other things. Right. Right, exactly. Like you do not seem neutral, and that's you really are neutral. You really are. You're just the facts, ma'am. You're not, you don't have a dog in the fight, really. I mean, and we'll talk about that later. Like that should be your vibe. I still get to go home and sleep in my bed tonight. I'm just telling you what I saw and what I observed. Absolutely. I would say that's a really good synopsis of it. What does he do when the first thing the defense starts to ask him, like, okay, your report says blah, 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 he interrupts. So remember when he goes like, in the city, and he's like, in the city, it says here you're in the county, something like that. Why is he interrupting? You don't do that. You are the one that is sitting there and waiting for the whole question to come out. Wait for the whole question to come out. So you know what the question is. I've seen witnesses interrupt to answer a question that wasn't being asked. You have to assess and make sure you understand what the question is before you answer. Even if you think you know, have you guys in conversation, this happens with me all the time. I'm super impatient. So like my husband will be telling me, like asking me a question and I'll interrupt him and say, yeah, I know, blah, 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 right? Can't do that on the stand. You've got to be polite, wait for the whole question to come out, and then answer it. Can't do that. Let's see. Those are my main stuff that I took down right now. And one more thing that goes back on the subtopic of the report. One thing that I think showed that he is pretty clueless also is when he answers the first question from the prosecutor by saying like, yeah, it's all in my report. If you know anything about court, you know a report is not admissible. We need you to testify and be cross-examined. So your report can't be cross-examined. So you can't just say like, oh yeah, it's all in my report. And we get this a lot from like patrol officers who don't want to show up for court, and they'll be like, it's all in my report. Can't you just, it's like, no, we need, like your report can't be cross-examined. Like we need you there. And so that kind of shows that he doesn't understand the process when he makes comments like that. So that was mostly a don't, not very many positives, but actually one other positive that I think could be there a little bit. Dan said, we got to be neutral. I think that I've seen people do way worse on how their demeanor changes when all of a sudden it turns over to cross. And with me, they're just sweetness and light, and they are so open and ready and just like helpful. And then it goes, okay, Your Honor, thank you. I'll pass the witness. Cross-examination counsel? Right? Don't change your demeanor at all when it changes over to, or sometimes I've seen people all of a sudden get like the fear of God in their eyes, like, oh, here we go. That was the easy part. Now comes the hard part. Poker face, okay? Demeanor should not be noted different between when the prosecutor's asking you questions and then when cross-examination comes up. Okay, so real basic stuff about testimony is that testimony is a form of evidence. It's actually interesting. Like when you hear the word evidence, you think like the gun, like you think the knife, the drugs, the thing, you know, all the evidence that was impounded, all the things that were found, like the bomb or whatever. Testimony is the biggest form of evidence. That makes up the bulk of all of our evidence is testimony. And it really is just a witness's answers to questions of lawyers, the judge, or members of the jury. When you guys have testified before in front of a jury, have you ever had jury questions? Have you ever had a jury ask you questions? And they're coming out of left field, some of those questions, right? But that's the right they have. And the judge has too. The judge can ask you questions too. So just be ready for that. It's not something you did wrong or anything. If all of a sudden the judge is like, okay, does any member of the jury have any questions? And they've got like a slew of questions for you. Testimony is going to be statements of fact or opinion in your case, if you're an expert, of which you have personal, actual, and percipient knowledge. This is one thing that we see kind of go awry in testimony a lot is you know a lot of things that you learned from one of your colleagues. You know a lot of things about the investigation that happened that you didn't actually have an actual percipient part of. And you want to talk about all those things, but really the laws of evidence say like, no, that's not appropriate. We have to ask that person, your colleague who saw that and collected that. if you saw him collect it, you can testify to it. But if you just have knowledge of it, it's not necessarily coming in because you are not you don't have actual like knowledge that you observed it. So just something to think about. We take this very, very, very seriously. And of course, like we just said when Dan brought up that you guys are neutral. You don't have a dog in the fight. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way, right? Sometimes you feel like you know who did this or you know what the answer is and you want to put forth a certain kind of like help maybe the case, help the prosecution. But be very, very, very careful if you ever have that feeling. If you ever have that feeling that you're trying to help by making anything up or even like fudging it a little bit. It's always got to be just the truth, even if it hurts the case, you know, the case, or even if it makes you look bad. Are you guys amazing? Yeah. You guys are talented. You guys are well trained. You know what you're doing. Are you still going to make mistakes? Every day. I do. I've been doing this for 20 years. I still make mistakes every day. You guys will too. And when you're on the stand and you're going to be asked about every little stupid mistake that you made in that case, and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I don't even, how do I even, why do I even still have a job? Like, I'm the worst. Like, how do I even, how am I even still employed? Because they're pointing out every little thing you did wrong. That's their job. Most of these guys are our friends. Like we have a small legal community. My husband, he's retired now, but the majority of his career he spent as a defense attorney. These are people that just have a job to do, and you just sit there and take it. And then usually in the hallway, you're shaking hands with them. I'm sure you guys have probably had that experience with some of them. Not all of them. Not all of them. I don't make eye contact with all of them. You know, just like anybody. So your testimony should be truthful, factual, and objective. Truthful, factual, and objective. Somebody over here mentioned he didn't get argumentative. That's a really good point and a really good goal. We're just telling the truth about what we know. There's nothing to get argumentative about, you know? And if there's anything that feels like a big attack, what's going to happen once they pass the witness? Exactly. We got redirect. We can clean it up. If it was a big enough deal, don't worry. We're going to clean it up. So you guys are pretty familiar with this. This is a little bit 101. But this is what our courtrooms look like. So you can kind of see, like, just tell me this. If this is a jury trial and the jury is sitting in those seats that are in the bottom left side of the photo, where is the defense attorney and the defendant? You made a gesture. Yes. And why is that? That's one of the things. So we can prevent that interaction, and sometimes the defendant might be kind of scary and intimidating to the jury. So we'll, you know, it's a better security situation if they're closer to the door, which is right there, which is the door that goes to the holding cell. You know, so it's close to that. Another thing is exactly. They have a privileged conversation with their attorney, and if we're sitting them too close to the jury, then that could be overheard. They should be able to speak openly without the chance of being overheard. So this space in the courtroom being placed there actually serves all of those purposes. So that's why the DA is always going to sit right next to the jury in a trial. Now, if you go to a preliminary hearing, it's swapped. And why is that? Exactly. You guys know all the in custodies that just came over from the jail through that door, through the tunnel, are now coming over there and they're sitting in the jury box. So we put the jury, if you ever have jury duty, just remember, you might get MRSA. You're sitting in the same chairs. Has anybody ever had jury duty, by the way? Have you been on a jury? Oh, that's so cool. They kicked you right off, huh? See, that's what I'm saying. They're like, we don't want that guy in our jury. Was it criminal cases? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would want you on my jury, but you'd get kicked by the defense. So there's lots of different places where you might testify, and there's different goals in each of them. So there's bail hearings, preliminary hearings, grand juries, evidentiary hearings, trials, sentencings, probation revos. And then what the DA's office doesn't do this. I don't handle these. But on the other side, there civil trials, depots, and certain kinds of administrative hearings you might testify at. And that's going to be usually like your agency is getting sued or you're getting sued or, something of that nature. So that's things to think about. There's different levels of prep for each of these different kinds of hearings. And I want you to know that. I want you to think about that. There's different goals of your testimony in each of these, and there's different burdens of proof in each of these different kinds of hearings. So the ones that you guys will typically testify in for our office is going to be a preliminary hearing, a grand jury, and a trial. For the most part, I'm not going to be seeing you very often at other kinds of things like probation, revos, and stuff like that. What's the burden of proof at a jury trial? What do I have to prove the case by? Beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the highest burden that exists, that actually is a burden that we have to take on in the legal system. What about at a grand jury? What's the burden of proof? What was that? No. No. Preponderance is like 50%, right? Preponderance means like a feather more. What's the lowest? What's one of the lowest burdens other than like reasonable suspicion? Probable cause. It's essentially probable cause, okay? At a grand jury or a preliminary hearing. So for those of you guys who have testified, anybody testified both at a grand jury or a prelim and at a jury trial? Way different, right? Because all we have to do is hit the elements with a PC at the grand jury or the prelim. Whereas for the trial, we've got to bring out all the stops. Like it's got to be the dog and pony show. We're showing this to members of the public and they don't understand all this stuff. The judge that's hearing the PC determination is going to know real quick. So think about that in terms of your level of prep. Where do you think you're going to have to prepare more? Yeah, we're going to do pre-trials for a trial. For a prelim, I'm probably going to try to pre-trial you if it's my case, but I can't tell you that everybody would. You might just be hitting the sand cold without talking to the DA on some of those prelims. Okay, so you're hitting the sand, not talking to anybody like, okay, what am I doing here again? And that's the way it is because of our volume. We have the highest volume of any large DA's office in the country. Like insane. So we have, for example, about 5 prosecutors per 100,000 members of our population, which really our population is much higher than that at any given time due to tourism. Manhattan has like 21 prosecutors per 100,000 in their population. So we're dealing with a ton of volume, and so we might not have time to always do an extensive pretrial before a grand jury or preliminary hearing. But before a trial, we better be doing it. And so that's something where you'll be getting a more level of testimony. Now, if this is not my purview, but I want to tell you, look at your agency's policies regarding if you testify about any of this stuff on the right. That is going to be about you and a lot less about a criminal case. And so prepare the crap out of that one and demand to get a pretrial. If you get subpoenaed to go to a depot or a civil trial on a case that you investigated as part of your job duties, do not show up cold. Call your counsel, call legal counsel for your agency and have them prep you. If you ever would testify at an evidentiary hearing, I think that most of the time the people that are testifying at evidentiary hearings are going to be more like our Metro guys who got the warrant or who did the search or who got the statement. But a lot of times evidentiary hearings are on like motions to suppress the statement for voluntariness violation or Miranda violation, or it's motions to suppress evidence because like allegedly there was a 4th Amendment violation. That was an unconstitutional search. Again, that is the time when you should be prepping the crap out of that, because that's about you. I mean, it's also about our case, but I want you guys to know, just as your friend, you should be prepping that, because that's where sometimes what happens out of the end of that hearing is all of a sudden the judge finds you to be not credible, and that could tank your career if you have a negative credibility finding. And so most of the time when we see negative credibility findings, in my opinion, it's because the judge thinks you were making stuff up when really you were just not prepared. And you didn't really understand what that was. And you just kind of showed up cold, like, oh, I got a sub today. Just like a prelim, you know, going to show up. You should be trying to prep those a lot more. Okay, the trial process. I want you guys to understand this so you understand kind of like our strife and what we're going through, because a lot of times you guys might understand our lack of communication during trial, or our like lack of a specific date for you due to what's happening in trial. So the first part is jury selection. That could go days. So when we talk and we pre-trial, like let's say we have trial on the 2nd, the Monday, and we pre-trial today, and you say, hey, what day does it look like that I'm going to testify? Couldn't tell ya. Couldn't tell ya. This could be, I could be off by an entire week at times, depending on how long my trial is. So I would give you kind of a ballpark, but you got to kind of understand, I don't know, because I don't know how much the defense attorney likes to hear his own voice in voir dire. I don't know what kind of bombs are going to explode, no pun intended to you guys, in the middle of trial, which, we're going to have to take care of, and it's going to take a bunch of extra time. We don't know. So these things take forever. We then have, after we get the jury impaneled, opening statements. You guys can't really typically go to that. And you also aren't supposed to go if you're on the case, you're not supposed to go to that. If you want to watch an opening statement on like your buddy's case and you're not going to testify and you weren't noticed as a witness, you can. The presentation of the evidence is when we're calling the witnesses. We're calling the witnesses, and during that time, there's something called the exclusionary rule. So you're not actually allowed to be in the courtroom at the time when another witness is testifying, because that would be like, getting your story straight, listening to what that person did and maybe like conforming your testimony to that. During this whole thing, we have rulings by the judge going on. We have motions. The defense is all the time going to do like all these motions for mistrial in the middle of the trial and stuff like that. So we don't know how many of those are going to happen. We don't know what weird things are going to pop up. Then the judge instructs the jury after everybody closes, and we have closing arguments, which I would encourage you to attend. If it's your case, it would be really cool if you, see you guys later, if you guys could attend. I always love it when my law enforcement team is there watching me. I feel like I do better and try to make them proud when they're there watching it and seeing it. And then the jury deliberates. So I just want to give you guys a little bit of a flavor of kind of what we're dealing with. You know that this is what you did too, Dan. Oh my gosh. Huh. It's an embedded video, but it's not working. Okay. Well, basically, here's the thing. You guys who have had jury duty, you saw what people did to try to get off the jury, right? The weirdest one that I've heard recently is there was this one lady who had jury duty, and no, that's okay. I mean, it's just a funny little video about the things that you can do to get out of jury duty, which you can Google, by the way. Like, there's all kinds of things that you can Google about how to get out of jury duty. But anyway, there was this one lady who had jury duty the other day, and it really wasn't going to be fair to have her on the jury because she had mental telepathy. So it was just going to be like kind of unfair, because she'd be able to read your mind, and she'd be able to read the mind of like all the witnesses and like the defendant, and like, so it might be something that you might want to consider in whether you want me on your jury. So we have literally like, it runs the gamut on the kind of things that people will do. And that takes, you don't know what kinds of things like that are going to pop up, which is just entertaining for sure, great stories, but people are just so interesting. Guys, does this give you a little bit of anxiety to see this? Just trying to. All right, okay, we know this. We know to call off. So these are the key, the key parts of the subpoena. I want you guys to know, like, if you want to call the person who is supposed to be handling that the next day, the deputy district attorney's name should be right down there. Next, it says like Steve Wolfson, Clark County District Attorney, by. So you can always try to call that person to find out what's going on. I don't know that we've ever had problems with fire not showing up for subpoenas. We have had problems with fire not coming in for pretrials because I don't know which agency, but it's hard to get legal to want to agree that you can pretrial with us. But they would come in for a subpoena. That's a detriment to you because we're going to give you guys information about how to testify in a way that's probably helpful to you. So, pretrials are really the key. But we have had a lot of people, a lot of our other law enforcement partners who think it is an invitation to a party when actually it's a court order to appear. So they will kind of come and go as they please if they feel like it to going to court that day. And actually, you could be held in contempt. Know this because we just brought it up. 601, call in the number in the box marked important to see if it's going the next day. We have a call off time of 4 p.m. And so like, we're so old school still. Like a lot of agencies will, you'd be able to maybe use an app or go online and check it. Like, you guys know, our ladies like make their recording every day. They get all of us emailing them and telling them like, hey, here's what's called off. Here's what's called on, left on by 4 o'clock. And then they go on and make that recording for every courtroom. It's not just one recording, it's for every courtroom. So that's the way it's working. So sometimes we'll have people asking us, like our witnesses saying like, hey, is it going tomorrow? And they're calling us at like 3. I might not know because my defense attorney knows that he doesn't have to tell me until closer to 4 because that's when I have to do my call offs. So I just have to wait for the procrastinator extraordinaire to get back to me before I'm going to know that. So just keep that in mind. This is Metro's policy, so I'm not going to go over it too much, but it's probably the same in your policies that you should know the status of your court case. You should be punctual, properly prepared, respectful, not chewing gum, speaking clearly, being accurate. Really what it comes down to is what you're supposed to be doing in there is communicating to the jury your observations made during your investigation. And we covered this even with our little video. The best tip I have is to prepare. That's going to make you calmer. It's going to make you confident because you know this stuff. You might still be a little bit nervous, but you guys will feel a lot better. So one of the things that you can do to prepare is pay attention today, but also practice and then future education. So I sent to Kevin some of the handouts that I have done for this before, and it's handouts that were done specifically mostly for law enforcement. So you can see what the specific things you should be doing to think about your testimony. Review everything. Our buddy on our video did not review a single thing, but there's so much that you guys have. Do you guys typically have photos, like lots of photos? Do you guys care? You guys don't wear body cam because it's an investigation? Typically, okay. But anyway, reports, photos, videos, statements. Are you taking statements from people, right? Review those statements. You might be asked about those. And everything. Maybe even examine the physical evidence. For me, for a trial, I will go to the evidence impound and review the evidence because I don't want to have it be like the first time I see that thing is when it gets opened on the stand. One time I went to the evidence impound and a suitcase had been impounded of a stripper. She was my victim. And it was very interesting what we found inside of that suitcase. Not that I would have brought that suitcase to court necessarily, but it just reminded me like there were even, she had a baby and there were used dirty diapers like in her suitcase that had been sitting in impound at Metro for like a year. No, but like it was still disgusting. like they have a little bit of a plasticky like outside, so it didn't get all over everything. But and you know, for me, for trial, this is for trial. I would want to also visit the scene. I'm going to visit the scene so I can really picture it and know it, and be able to really ask the witnesses those questions about the scene with that actual knowledge. Now, so right, like true, if the whole thing burns down, but a lot of the times it's for like the cases that I've had, I guess fire did a good job because the whole building didn't burn down. And so you can kind of go back to them in certain circumstances. But you're right. If there's nothing to look at the scene, then there's no reason. Or sometimes it's like, and it's an apartment and I can't get back in there, I'm not going to go to the scene. But to the extent that you can, it really helps to kind of understand things. So like, I've gone to scenes before where I'm listening to witnesses talk about like their vantage point on things. And I'm going to go stand right where they stood and understand what they were looking at and how I'm going to take pictures from that spot, even though, you know, I have a ton of pictures, I'm going to use those pictures. So those are the kinds of things that I want to do. And I'll oftentimes go with my cops, like the people that maybe are the investigator to help me and show me. Listen, I don't want you to be a robot and be completely memorized, because that's going to sound weird and not genuine. So I'm not saying, when I say here, practice phrasing, I'm not saying like have a little button you press and all of a sudden out comes your prepared speech. But you should, there's going to be some hard questions, and maybe there's going to be some things that you as an expert need to explain that's kind of a little bit difficult for a jury or a regular person, a member of the public. Like let's say you're talking to like your kid's friend from school's mom. How would you describe this to them? That's the kind of person that's on our jury, right? So maybe you want to practice your phrasing so your neighbor Karen could understand it. You know, the guy that you pump gas next to at the gas station, just some random, could understand it. So practice your phrasing maybe on certain things so that you have your little, I call them vignettes, like you have your little prepared portions that now you can kind of like, when the question calls for it, you can just like deliver it. And it will help you because you'll be confident that you know how you're exactly going to phrase it and it won't come out wrong. Because I have seen really smart people before on the stand say something that really wasn't accurate because it came out wrong. So, you know, practice that and get good at some of those little speeches you're going to give. With expert testimony, it's especially important because it is hard to explain to a regular person. Yes, great point. Yeah, so we would pre-trial about that. So we would consider in our pre-trial conference how we're going to handle that. And that's exactly what a good example of this is practice how you're going to say it and how you're going to explain it. Because one of the, like I told you I teach trial ad at the law school. Just last night, we covered with my class some things about direct examination. And one of them is you want to cover the bad stuff in your direct. Because you don't want cross to all of a sudden stand up. You want to take the winds out of their sails on cross. You don't want cross to stand up and be able to totally skewer that person without having to already explained it. So if there's a mistake, we're going to talk about it on direct. I'll ask you in pre-trial, so like what happened there? Like what was that mistake? And then we'll talk through it and you'll figure out a way to articulate it. And maybe it'll be falling on your sword. Like we're going to make mistakes, right? I make mistakes every day. You guys are going to make mistakes too. We're going to just get in front of that. And it's different for every mistake, you know, like if it's like a big hole in the investigation, like you should have done another part of the investigation, had something else tested or something like that, and it never was done. And we got to explain that. We got to explain, yeah, I should have done that, or we didn't do that because our policy says X, and so we were just in compliance with our policy. There's a lot of different reasons for some of those bad facts. And I say bad facts, it might not really be bad. Just something they're gonna try to, you know, slant as put it out there as bad. You gotta also know the law related to the case. So I always say like, hey, if you're arresting someone for, in your case, I guess arson, You got to know what the law is on arson. You got to know what the crime is. You got to know what the elements of that are. You know, you got to know what law you're working with. So be ready for that on the stand for the defense attorney to ask you maybe about that. Also your policies. That's going to be huge with what Eric just brought up, is having to explain the way we did some things. So one thing that when I was young that we had a lot of, you guys might not deal with this because you're kind of a little bit different in terms of your investigations, but gunshot residue. You guys have heard of like gunshot residues, forensic testing. When I was young, that was like a big deal. Like, oh, the guy has GSR in his hands. Well, a lot of studies show that like if you sit in a cop car, you probably have GSR on you. Like if you, even if you shot a gun like 3 days ago, you might still have GSR on you. So we kind of stopped using that, and Metro has a new policy in place where they will not usually do it unless certain things are in place. If you were put in cuffs, they won't do GSR on you because cuffs are going to have GSR on it. So those kinds of things, a defense attorney can make it sound like, oh, you know that there's the ability to do GSR testing, right? Gunshot residue, where the gun would fire and there'd be residue on someone's hands, and you didn't do that in this case, did you? Well, we might say, well, that's out of our policy, and here's why. Our policy holds that we don't do GSR testing in circumstances such as this because there's GSR on handcuffs or in cop cars or whatever. Explain that. Like I said, meet with the deputy district attorney, and then if you are going to use exhibits or visual aids, when you guys have testified before, have you done that? Have you used like visuals of some kind during your testimony? Like what's an example of when you were used, Dan? Photographs, for sure. Yeah, we should look at that. But what about like actual kind of like physical pieces of exhibits or something like that? Yes, exactly. In my case that I told you about, it was Danny Wattenberger. He put together a mock-up of the bomb. The bomb was it was in a coffee cup that he got from 7-Eleven. And they actually found like the SKU number of he was so good. He found the SKU number in all the debris at the Lexar parking lot, figured out what exact cup it was and did a mock-up of that. And now we're going to play around with that while Dan's on the stand. And that's going to be something we might want to practice because it could get kind of awkward if you're not used to that. With firearms, you guys are not going to have firearms, but with firearms, we have to train our law enforcement officers how to appropriately show and demonstrate a firearm in the courtroom, right? Because that makes everybody really nervous. It makes the security nervous. It makes the judge nervous. It makes the jury nervous if there's a firearm out there. So we're going to practice with it. Okay, in the pretrial conference, we like to do that in person if possible. So we can like take a look at the pictures and we can take a look at any, evidence that we're going to use. It just feels like it goes better if we can kind of sit down together and look at this. And so we'll talk about kind of what we see that our direct is going to go, what your role is in the case, what our strategy is. We'll talk about weaknesses. We'll talk about, and we want you to bring forward the weaknesses too. Like, hey, I did a lot of preparation. I reviewed my report, and here's something that I see that I might be cross-examined on. What do you think? We want you to bring that because you guys are the experts on whether you think there might be other things that you could have done, or whether you're looking at your report and going like, oh crap, that wasn't the best. We want you to share that with us so we can get ahead of it. We're gonna just determine whether we'll bring it up or not. And then the biggest thing probably is like, we're gonna know from talking to the defense attorney where they're headed in this case. Maybe they really don't have any questions for you. Like maybe it's like there's no doubt that like everything you said in your report is accurate. They're not really contending that it's not. They're contending that somebody else did it or something like that. So if we already know that, we can kind of prep you for that. Like, hey, we don't expect a lot of like super pointed cross. It's going to be more just they might not have any cross for you. So we'll have an idea of that because when we talk to them throughout the whole pendency of the case, which is sometimes years, we will have talked about negotiations. And we almost always offer negotiation on every case. So they would have told us why our offer should have been lower. So they'll tell us like, well, this is wrong with your case. This is wrong with your case. they'll tell us kind of where they think that they can see weaknesses in our case, so we can share that with you in the pretrial. I will say that I believe that the expectations for law enforcement witnesses is higher. From our judges, from our juries, it's gonna be higher. And that's fine. That's what you signed up for. Like I said, you guys are expert witnesses. This is something that you can rise to this occasion. Absolutely. When you come off, you know, as that you have a dog in the fight, it kind of tarnishes that a little bit. You guys are neutral, impartial investigators of the fact. Trained observers, familiar with court, unlike our buddy. Judges and jurors are going to hold you to that higher standard. And we're proud of that. You will exceed those expectations. I've seen it happen over and over again. So when you come in there and you're worried about this, don't worry about it. I think, you know, for the most part, I see our law enforcement witnesses and officers really represent their agencies and our community really well. One of the ways we're going to do that is with appearance. So if you are going to wear your uniform, you know, your uniform should be pressed. Remember, I want to talk to you about that beforehand. Like if I'm the one that's doing the jury trial, we got to have a conversation. Like, do you want me to show up in my uniform or a suit, or what do you want me to wear? I'm usually going to want just a really nice looking uniform, ideally, to put you in character. But if you do, everything should be perfect. It's not just a regular day at work. Like, make sure your shoes are shined, the uniform is clean, pressed, you know, all that kind of stuff. If you show up in a suit, this is Jason McCarthy, homicide detective. This is perfect. You can never go wrong for men. You can never go wrong in the courtroom with a white shirt, which is like pressed, you know, no wrinkles, a kind of like bold colored tie, cartoon characters or anything like that, just like real basic, and a dark suit. Here he has like on a gray suit. You could wear a like navy suit. Like I always wear a black suit. That's gonna be perfect. If you just want the recipe for success, it should be conservative and professional. Like, we are not there for a fashion show. We are not there to try to be like Mr. in fashion. Okay, we are there to show the community the work that you did on this case. So you got to have the kind of like professional attire that shows that, not like for women. And there's only, okay, 2 women in the room. We're never going to wear anything tight. We're never going to wear anything flashy. If you're going to wear jewelry, it'll be like super, super basic. We're not trying to look cute. We're trying to look appropriate. So your makeup should be really neutral. Everything should be very neutral. You don't want your jury to look at you and think about your clothes. You want them to look at you and go like, oh, respectable, you know, member of our community. Love that. This is a big deal, a way bigger deal than we think when we sit in here and talk about it. They judge you. They will judge you based on what you look like. Again, is that fair? No. Is that the world that we live in? Yes. So, oops, nothing inappropriate or flashy. Your grooming should be on point, you know, like freshly haircut. For women, I always like it when our law enforcement partner women are just wearing it like, you know, out of your face. If you are the type of person that's always like going like this with your hair or something, like, make sure that's not happening because that looks unprofessional. Don't come in there with your Starbucks, like sauntering in, like you have all the time in the world to come in there. Like, you are working that day. Like, you're serving the community. You shouldn't have time to do that according to your people that are just members of the community. I did a trial once that the entire trial was televised because it was a famous person who was the victim. It was Javon Walker was his name. He was he had just signed like a multi-million-dollar signing bonus with the Raiders when they were still in California. And he came to Vegas to party, and he was a real good target because he was blinging out with like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of jewelry on him. And you know, he got that taken from him that night. He got an orbital fracture. So it wasn't the biggest case in the world really, but it was a famous person. So the whole thing was televised. It was myself and my co-counsel, who was male, against a female defense attorney. I was pregnant at the time. So thank God the trolls on the Facebook page related to this didn't say much about my appearance, but 90% of the comments on that Facebook page were about the other attorney's appearance. You know, these are the kinds of people that are watching these cases because they're interested. They're interested in court TV, like they're interested in watching this kind of stuff, and yet all they're commenting about is the attorney's appearance. Her hair and her flipping her hair, and her pants being too tight, and her cottage cheese that they could see through her pants, and her heels being too high, and the tone of her voice, and you go on and on. I was floored that when they don't think anybody could really, you know, find out who they are and they think they're anonymous, that's what they're talking about. So just know when you take the stand, like that's what they're going to be doing to you too. They're going to be looking at you and determining, hey, do I like this person based on their appearance? Sad, but true. It's going to be right back to like second grade. Do I like how this person looks? Is down to what? Yeah. And then that's the thing is like, I think people are even more bold now to be out there with those viewpoints. This was well, my daughter was in my tummy at the time, is 13 now, so it was a long time ago. But it was like that then too. So this is just a picture I took of some of my new attorneys a couple years ago to show you some potential like appropriate work attire or court attire. I took a picture of them that day actually for that because they all had on suits that I think would be appropriate for court. So we're not only talking about once you open the door to the courtroom and walk in, we're also talking about anytime you're down in the area of court. Think about this. What if you, in your effort to like hurry down to court that day, cut somebody off and that person sees you and they like scowl at you and then you walk in and that person's on the jury, you know? What if you guys walk into the courthouse together and you're kind of BSing together and whatever, and it happens to be that you're walking in with somebody who ends up on the jury? At the courthouse, you just got to be on your, you know, on your best behavior at all times. Act professionally. You are going to be, you know, seen down there. So just to keep that in mind. My uncle was an attorney in Minneapolis. I'm from Minnesota, and he was a litigator, and he said he would never jaywalk because he never wanted any potential juror to see him doing something that would be possibly, you know, looked down upon, that was illegal. Like he, even in the public eye, he would always just be careful with how he acted. So keep that in mind. I mean, hopefully you're doing that in your life anyway, but if not, at least when you're like in the area of the courthouse downtown, like keep this in mind. If you're out there talking to your friends during waiting for court, you're going to be asked about it by the defense. Oh, so who's that person you're sitting next to? You're under oath. You got to tell the truth, right? Were you talking about the case? Were you getting your story straight? Were you asking him what, you know, what he testified to? That's not a good look. So I think generally when you're down there, consider that. Like you're going to be, people might be watching what you're doing. Don't take loud phone calls. Just bring a book or bring your report and review it, and just wait for the bailiff to come out or the marshal to come out and call you. Wanted to show you guys this. This is the jury instruction that the judge reads to the jury. This is the law that the jury is read regarding the credibility of witnesses. So they're going to be instructed, the jury's going to be instructed that the credibility or believability of a witness should be determined by his manner upon the stand, his relationship to the parties, his fears, motives, interests, or feelings, his opportunity to observe the matter to which he testified, the reasonableness of his statements, and the strength or weakness of his recollections. Now then the next part is probably doesn't matter that much for you because hopefully you're not going to do anything that would be considered a lie. But if you believe that a witness has lied about any material fact in the case, you may disregard the entire testimony of that witness. So if they think that a witness lied, the judge tells them, you can throw it all out. Don't even have to consider any of it. But those are the things that the jury is told officially, like, hey, you can consider these things. Your manner upon the stand, that's what we're talking about here today, right? Professional, neutral, fact finder, not like our guy that we watched in the video, right? The reasonableness of your statements, the strength or weakness of your recollections. So that's why what I said at the beginning about if you remember some little details when you're asked about it, and you can get that, and you can say like, yeah, I arrived at this time exactly. That is the jury's even told like, hey, that's good. That should reflect well upon your credibility. The jury's even told that, but we just kind of know that by nature. You guys are impartial, unbiased. You have no personal interest in this outcome. I mean, you really don't. Have I literally shed tears at times when other people have lost cases? Yes. I don't have a personal outcome. I mean, I don't have a personal interest in the outcome, but I care. I mean, you might feel that way too, that like, this is not right. This guy should not have been found not guilty or whatever. But in reality, I still went home and slept in my own bed that night. You know, I don't actually have a personal interest in the outcome. All you're going to be doing is telling the truth, even if it hurts our case. Now, impartiality, being neutral, you know, not favoring one side or the other, does not mean that you should come off as like, this ain't no big deal. This is boring. I'm not interested, right? Or passive. You should still be there, open, interested, trying to give as much information and being helpful and, you know, paying attention. Your demeanor should be open, interested, and honest. That means when you're on the stand, this demeanor, not that you're doing this right now, but on the stand, don't do that, okay? There's studies about this. You guys have probably heard about this, right? There's studies about people's body language and what this kind of thing means. They say that even like not being able to see someone's hands kind of detracts from their credibility. So consider, you know, crossing your arms is probably a no-no. Frowning and making faces. Some people just pull a lot of faces. Try to like keep this in check when you're on the stand. Sighing. I've had cases before where the witness will be asked a question on cross and they'll be like, before they answer. That's not good. It's not going well. If you're yawning on the stand, that's not good. Another little thing that I've seen some people do, a lot of people in their just normal conversation, do you know people like this? They'll say like, well, to be honest, actually my 13-year-old does this all the time. She'll start everything with like, well, to be honest. It's like, well, aren't you always honest? You're under oath. Everything you say should be honest. And your demeanor should be calm and prepared. What we're up against with this is, have you guys ever sat down in those chairs and it's just like they are on little swivels and you'll see witnesses like they don't even know they're doing it and they're like swiveling. This isn't the same kind of chair, but like you get my vibe. And I don't know if it's because they're nervous and they're shaking or if it's because like they just got some nervous energy they're trying to get out. Another one I saw one time actually at our homicide detective moot court. This guy would not stop like doing something like that. Like anything like that, you just look like there's something wrong, like you're not calm, like you're nervous. This is the one I always do. I got to be so careful with this. Like I had one time, I was playing with this thing of the pen because that's where my nervous energy goes as to what my pen or whatever. And I did that in the middle of my trial. And luckily I didn't hit anybody, like I almost just did. But that is something that, you know, I know about myself. If you got to kind of spot what your little things are and try to maybe prepare yourself so you don't have to do it. That's what I was talking about with the hair. Like one of my friends, she always has her hair in her face. So she'll put a bobby pin back so she just doesn't have that problem. A lot of people try to fill up extra space with filler. So you're asked a question and you want to collect your thoughts and think about it for a second and you'll be like, right? It looks like you're searching you should just know the answer. It's fine to pause. It's absolutely fine to take a minute and collect yourself to pause. That's the appropriate thing to do in that case. And also, especially with you guys, like most of the time you're testifying as experts, right? A lot of the time. And this is key with you guys because some of this stuff is not accessible to a regular person talking to you. It's not going to be like easy for them to understand and digest. So we need you to really think about who your audience is. Your audience is the jury, or if it's a bench trial or a prelim, it's the judge. You've really got to speak to them and teach them. That's who you're talking to, not me as the attorney. I'm fine if you completely ignore me. you got to look at them and turn to them. It's kind of annoying when you see people who do, like, let's say that you guys are the jury and these guys are asking me the question and they're like, could you please state your name and spell it for the record? My name is Nell Christensen. It's Nellchris. You know, that's cheesy. We're not going to do it on every little thing. But if I say to you, like, well, could you please explain to the jury X, Y, and Z? Perfect teaching moment. You're not explaining it to me. I don't need to know it. I want you to teach the jury. So that's when you kind of turn to the jury, and we should be seeing some eye contact with the jury. It really, I mean, I hate to say this and admit this, but I really think the reality of some of these cases is a popularity contest. They're going to pay more attention to you if they like you. They're going to trust you more if they like you. And they're going to like you more if you're a normal human that they can connect to. So we're going to turn over and talk to the jury. When we do moot courts, it's really funny how sometimes the witness is like allergic to the jury. Like we'll do with our crime scene analysts, like Las Vegas Metro's crime scene analyst moot court. Those guys have never testified before usually. And they're just like, we'll be like, ma'am, could you tell the jury? And they're like, they're just talking straight ahead, right at me. Like they won't turn and talk to the jury because that's so scary. So keep that in mind. Poise and self-control are going to be key. For those of you guys who have testified and been subject to cross, was there a time when you felt kind of like your blood starting to boil a little bit with the defense, some of the questions they were asking you, where maybe you felt yourself maybe not being able to be as poised? You guys are all super cool as cucumbers. Maybe that didn't happen to you. Exactly. There's that too. Right. And that's the thing that you have to, like, one of the things when you get that kind of a question, and we see that too and actually those questions are going to come from us too. Like, we don't know your expertise. You're going to have to be really kind to both sides with how you respond to those kind of like stupid questions. Like they obviously they're not using the right terms. They're not asking the right questions. It's kind of like, okay, are we seriously asking this? And you can't have that vibe of like, right? You've got to kind of maintain your composure and just answer the question, even if it's already been asked before, even if you've already explained it before. You just have to have that patience. That vibe of patience is going to be a huge thing. But sometimes it is going to be about you're feeling you're under attack. You're being you and your skills and what you do for a living and how good you are at it, it's all of a sudden under attack by this defense attorney. That is the number one defense right now. The number one defense right now is the cops did a shitty job. The cops don't know what they're doing. They just are lazy and they just did the easiest route, and the easiest route was just to pin it on my client. And that is getting a lot of play. So we're seeing it more and more that's kind of the route they're going. So they might try to get that with you, like you don't know what you're doing, you did a terrible job, like you should have done about 10 other things that you didn't do. And so you're going to feel like kind of anger a little bit boiling up or defensiveness boiling up, and you got to stay poised. That's their job. Just remember that. That's what they're doing. And they have won cases that they should have lost with this tactic. So they're going to keep trying it. So we just have to be ready for that. So they are going to try to generate anger. And one of the things that they have had success with sometimes is they're trying to portray you as law enforcement as kind of like hotheads and like you're gonna just not really be that respectable. And if they can get you to demonstrate that on the stand by being a jerk back to them with their questions, that's a win for them. Yeah. Exactly. Right.
And they win, no matter what. I was actually ready. When I watched The Officer. I do that.
Yep. Well, and you will, so, I mean, you're gonna make mistakes, right? There are gonna be things that we're gonna be able to get through it.
Yeah.
But if you all of a sudden like stoop to their level and start being kind of a jerk back to them, now your credibility is shot.
Yeah.
Because you're like, yeah, that's exactly what the defense attorney was saying this guy would be like. And look at him on the stand, he's just being like, you know, losing his cool. So you will actually win if you just stay poised and just answer the questions, even if it looks bad for you. Like, even if it's like, yeah, I could have done that. I've seen some really great answers be like, yeah, I probably could have done that. And next time I probably would. Well, that's super genuine. And I think that that goes a long way with the jury if you say this, if it's true. You know, don't cop to things that you don't believe. But yes. Yes.
Trying to get me crazy. That's not. I think the judge. What's your question? What was your impression of it? There's a lot of emotional.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a couple good points in there. One of them is if it is outside of your expertise, it's just a beautiful answer to say, like, to admit that is outside instead of trying to guess. Like one time I had a coroner on the stand and all of a sudden the defense started to try to ask her about like the effects of methamphetamine on the body. And she's like, I'm a doctor, but that's not my area of expertise. I'm not able to talk about that. And she's like so smart, but that gave her a lot more credibility to say like, no, that I don't know any more about that than you could if you Googled it type thing. But the other thing that you mentioned about keeping your answers short, absolutely. Like there's no reason to answer anything more than what the question was. And I think that can get us into trouble sometimes on cross when you're trying to kind of like push some things out and you get it out in one of your answers. Sometimes that can be done very well and artfully. So this is why it's not a science. It's just conventional wisdom and art and practice. But typically, especially for beginners in testimony, it's best to abide by that rule. Like just answer the question asked, nothing more. Just that. But my point that I want you guys to think about is like, if you don't stoop, the defense attorney is going to keep seeing if he can goad you into this. Maybe they keep stooping lower and lower and lower, and their vibe keeps getting, less and less appropriate. And if you continue to just stick the high ground and you don't actually fall for it and stoop, he just now is the one who looks terrible to the jury because he kept trying harder and harder and harder and kept lowering himself lower and lower and lower. And you just remained up there dealing with it. So now you won that. So keep that in mind that this is actually an opportunity. Don't feel upset. Feel it is an opportunity to impress the jury with your strength of character and dignity. Question. Right. Yeah, no. That's like the epic example we use in trial advocacy is all the Few Good Men stuff. Colonel Jessup. Okay, now here's the thing. What's your name? 70s cop? Mike? Perfect. Mike. This is what, you have that answer or that question that's kind of like, that's kind of what you feel inside is like, you don't know what you're talking about, right? Exactly. So watch your tone. Do not ever say those things. Like I already told you, like I have had this happen from cop witnesses. Like I already told you multiple times. Boom. That's exactly one of their tactics. That is an actual taught technique to see if they can get you to be a jerk back to them or maybe say something different. Yeah. So that don't come back with it. Just patience. So patient.
They try to catch you, so. So just, you said this.
Yeah, they're gonna try to circle back. That's just so strategic. I don't know why my partner did that. Why don't you ask him? Now you're gonna have that happen all the time. Remember at the beginning I said like you're only supposed to testify to things that you observed, that you have recipient knowledge of. But you have to think of a nice, graceful way to say that instead of like, I don't know, I didn't do that. Why don't you ask somebody else? You have to say like, actually, that wasn't my role in this case. Something like that. Just more patient and not getting a tone with it. When actually, remember the video? Another thing that he did is he goes, do you swear to tell the truth? Of course I do. We don't need to add that. Like just yes. Same thing with your answers to these questions. You don't want to, it's fine once in a while to say some of these things probably, but for the most part, just answer the questions briefly, yes or no. You should not be asking the questions, okay? There could be examples of times when you would, such as, could you please repeat the question? I'm sorry, could you please rephrase the question? I don't think I understand it. Those are fine questions because you're asking for something that's clarification. But you're not going to, when they start being, accusatory in their tone and stuff, you're not going to ask them like, what is that supposed to mean? Well, what would you do in this situation? Well, what would you have liked me to have done? No questions like that should come from you. Inside of you might be feeling those things, but do not ever let that out. Just answer the questions, and you are going to feel like a little bit of a punching bag. Okay, it's kind of like Jesus, turn the other cheek, like, and then again and again and again. You're gonna feel like that. That's just the nature of some crosses, and your best tact is just to like survive it without ever letting yourself stoop. Here's one of the things that we talked about with the video where he's interrupting to answer a question. No, you have to listen to the full question. You have to do that because any of you guys who have testified ever been almost murdered by the court reporter? They're taking everything down. They're taking everything down. I know I have. They're going to be taking everything down. If you talk over each other, interrupt each other, that is going to be bad for the record. That is the written record of this, because everything in a criminal trial is recorded and taken down and reduced to a transcript. So we have to only speak one at a time. Don't speak over each other. But the other thing that this serves is you got to listen to the whole question and know what the question is. Be sure you know what the question is before you answer it, because you don't want to answer a different question and then you were actually inaccurate. Don't speculate, tell the truth. What if you really don't know? If you think it's in your report, you could say, I don't remember, but I believe I noted that in my report. Okay, now I, as the DA know, I can just use your report to refresh your recollection. Okay, but what if you really don't know? Then that's what you say. I don't know. Don't guess. It's okay to ask to repeat or rephrase, like we just said. Never need to embellish. Admit mistakes without being defensive. And you know that we can object if they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing, or we can come back and clean it up on redirect. So we got your back. Now, I'll tell you what, though. I'm not coming to the rescue of somebody who I think is really good on the stand, because they don't need it, and I don't want the jury to see me doing that. I want them to just handle it themselves. So if I'm not doing a lot of objections and I'm kind of expecting a lot from that witness, I feel like that is a boost to that witness's credibility. They don't need my protection. then that I feel like is a stronger witness in the eyes of the jury. So if we're not, if your prosecutor's sitting there and not asking, not objecting, and not calling them out for being argumentative and stuff, it's probably because they believe that you can handle it and you can stand up to it. Have you guys ever felt yourself when you're on the stand, like all of a sudden dropping into cop talk and like nobody else but you understand this like impenetrable language? These are regular people. That's why I give the example of like, can you think of like your neighbor down the street who you see when you're walking your dog? Have you explain a fire investigation to them? Or, you know, the person that when you go to your kid's school and watch the like concert, like the person sitting right next to you, like, let's turn to them and explain a fire investigation to them. Like, they do not talk like you talk. So I laugh at these. If we do have these that come out, or here's another one. At Metro, they always use the codes, like that was a 411. It's like nobody knows what that means. Not even I know what that means, buddy. Like let's explain this. So I will try to, you know, have a moment of levity with the jury and be like, okay, we don't speak that language. Could you please tell us what that means? What is a 411? What are you talking about? But to the extent that you guys can just be regular humans, this is a thing to avoid. Now, in the handouts that Kevin will send you, this is one of the things. This is one of the things that a lot of experts on law enforcement testimony will tell you. It does not make you look smarter and better when you're using all these like police speak language. So this is not just me saying this. This is like universal, like judges, defense attorneys, everybody is saying like, you don't come off that great when you talk like this.
Guys are all firemen and they use fire. They'll say, I was on three sides at First Division. And all the firemen in the room, they know exactly where you're standing. Nobody else in the world knows what the hell you just said.
Yeah,
So you can
exactly.
backside of the building.
If you do say that, then you have to just explain what it means. So define terms, explain concepts, and teach the jury. So you might say something like, can you say that again? Seaside First Division. I was standing at Seaside First Division. That's what we call, that's our you know, fire speak for explain it. You know, that's fine. I feel like that's endearing. That would still teach the jury. But so if you find yourself accidentally using that term, just like correct yourself and define it immediately. But yeah, exactly. Like when I'm doing pre-trials with people, I don't even speak the language. Like we don't even speak the same language, and I am adjacent, you know, law enforcement adjacent, because I'm a prosecutor, and I don't even understand what people are talking about. That same point is make your meanings clear. So if you're talking about the concept or a term, define it. Slang. We do this a lot with like when maybe an officer or a detective is talking about a witness's statement and they use some slang terms, they'll have defined that. I don't know if you guys will do that as much. Your policies, complex information, you got to share that knowledge and teach the jury. When you guys first testified, did you ever have a moment when all of a sudden it's like, objection, Your Honor, and you'd have no idea what just happened and what you're supposed to do, like after that whole thing went down? The biggest thing is just stop. Stop speaking and wait. Overruled, what does that mean? If the judge says overruled, what does that mean? What does that mean you get to do? You can, yeah. Overruled means like, no, we're not, that objection doesn't work. You still get to talk about it. Now, you can answer the question, but at a really good witness, even if the attorney doesn't ask the question again, they'll say, hey, could you please repeat the question? Because now we're all back on the same page. You might not even remember what the question is, by the way. By the time all that went back and forth, you might not even remember what the question is. So ask the attorney to repeat the question. But it's also very good to get the jury back to where you were, and not just because once you blurt out that answer, it's not going to have the same effect because they don't even remember what the question was either. So sustained is the opposite of that. That means like you can't answer the question. So you just wait for the next one. Now, this is, I don't know why I even have to say this, but we don't always, it's like balls and strikes, right? You're a pitcher, you threw a strike and the ump called it a ball. Happens all the time. Happens to us too. Happens all the time to us, even with really good umps. And it's not your call. The judge decides what comes in and what's relevant. And we might be able to go back and try to get it in a different way or whatever, but it's not going to be your call to just bulldoze through it and talk about it. And the reason I have this in here is because this has happened before, where an officer really wants to get some piece of information in, even though maybe the judge has even already done a ruling that it can't come in. That's not a good plan. We're not going to just like ignore the judge's ruling, even if we disagree with it. All right, this is a another video, which I'm not going to show right now because I just out of concern for the time, another video, but I can also send it to you if you ever want to see just another example. So what we're really worried about, I think what you guys are probably concerned about is cross. Direct is not going to be that hard. Direct is going to be like us kind of like giving you some softballs to knock out of the park. And we're going to lead you through it in terms of like, we'll get you to where you need to be. Cross, on the other hand, is what you're concerned about. And the reason I put this up here is because there are full-on books written just on cross-examination. There are a ton of different experts on cross. There is strategy on cross. I teach trial at the law school, but there's a class called direct examination and cross-examination at the law school. There are conferences that are done by expert trial attorneys who just teach defense attorneys how to do cross. Defense attorneys put themselves on YouTube showing how awesome they are at cross and all their good stuff that they can do in cross and show off. So it's a whole thing where there are strategies that we can call out what they are. And so we're going to go through some of that. We'll talk about some of the strategies that they typically use so you can spot it. I feel like that puts the witness at ease when they're like, oh, I see what you're doing. You know, in your head, you don't say that out loud, but in your head, you can kind of spot the tactics and the strategies that they're using. First thing, we already said this, do not ever change your demeanor when all of a sudden you get to cross. Same demeanor with me as you have with the defense attorney. That's because you're just impartial. Don't let your ego ever affect your testimony. Your ego, I know this is so hard, but it really isn't about you. It's about whatever they can do to put on a little show. So let your ego just be checked at the door when you come in there. Do not volunteer information. This is the point that you were making. Do not volunteer information unless it's needed to ensure the jury is not misled. So an example of that is, I'm asking you a yes or no question, okay? This is just going to be answered by yes or no. And then they proceed to ask you a question that you cannot just answer yes or no without misleading the jury. Now you're going to offer more information. But if you can answer a question yes or no, and it's not going to mislead the jury, or it's not going to like kind of be only half the story, then you should answer yes or no. Okay. Remain calm when they talk about your mistakes. Admit your errors. Admit your omissions. Don't hide it. Okay. So these are two of my favorite defense attorneys. Josh Tomchek. Anybody guys know him? He was actually in our office for a really long time. And then Chris Oram. They'll ask you on direct or on cross. And I've seen people crumble for this question. It's so funny. Like whenever I do a pretrial, I always say, hey, they might ask you whether we met to prepare for trial. And of course we did. Well, they know anyway, like they know we do. Of course we did. Are we really going to go in front of a jury and just like put on this show for a jury and be in front of a jury without having done some prep and reminded ourselves about this? No, there's nothing wrong with that. I've literally seen cops look over at me and be like, I'm like, what are you doing? Just answer the question. Like, tell the truth. Yes, we met. Like, they're all worried that there's this big, like, oh, we shouldn't have met. No, of course we did. And in fact, if they I have had them say stuff like that in their closing, and then I'll stand up in rebuttal and say, like, ladies and gentlemen, of course I met with the witnesses because I didn't want to come in here in front of you today and not be prepared because this is an important enough case that we needed to be prepared to show you what happened. Of course I met with them. There's nothing wrong with that. And what I always tell my witnesses too is like, if they ask you what we talked about, what I'm telling you, the most important thing is to tell the truth. But then it's so beautiful when they're like, oh, what did you guys talk about? She just told me to tell the truth. Love it. That's a nice little moment. So did you talk to the DA about the case? There's nothing wrong with that. Yes, the answer is yes. They might try to suggest something from that. Don't worry about it. You don't need to say, all you need to do is answer the question, yes, I did. Don't worry about it. Here's Mike's example. Same question 7 times with maybe like 1 word different. Maybe you're going to say something different and hoping that you're going to get real cranky about it. Just another tactic, another thing you can spot that they're doing. And oh, you are so patient with your responses, right? This is one that I see them do purposefully. Like, what's something that you guys, is there some testing that you guys do that maybe you send to the lab or something? So they'll ask you like about that. Well, the appropriate witness to testify about that is actually the analyst, not you. Maybe you collected it and sent it to the lab. So they'll ask you about the like testing and how that analysis went and everything. And you know that, but you're not the appropriate witness for that. So it's going to be like you're trying to not be cooperative or something. If they blatantly ask you what were the results, there's nothing wrong with you on cross. You know what the results were. You can answer it. It's not appropriate for them to ask you that because you're not the recipient witness for that. They start getting to the weeds about the analysis and stuff like that. Then you have to just gracefully, patiently say, well, there was a different person who did the analysis in the case. That wasn't me. I'm the one who collects it and sends it for testing, and then I receive the results. So I'm aware of what the results were, but I wasn't the one who did the analysis. Something just simple like that. Okay, now, if you ever hear these words to start a question, earlier you testified that alert, 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 they're about to say something that you did not say. They're about to say something, and maybe not. Sometimes they might just repeat what you said and then ask you about it, but be careful. Your ears should go, okay, what are you trying to say that I said? And they're going to say it in a different way. They're going to spin it maybe in their way. So just be ready for that. And when they do that, you'll just have to nicely, politely correct them. Actually, what I said on direct, I believe, was blankety blank. And not in a rude way, right? You're not going to come at them and be like, no, what I said was blankety blank. You're going to just say, what I testified to on direct was blank. And you know, whatever, they may have a follow-up from that. So these are like actual things that these guys are taught to do. So just keep that in mind. This is just, we expect this. Here's what I call the primrose path. Now, you would agree with me that it's important to be thorough as a fire investigator. There's no way you're going to say no to that, right? Yes. You would agree with me that it's important to investigate the whole case, investigate all leads. In fact, you learned that in the academy. And in fact, you have additional trainings on this so that you are able to investigate all leads. It's very important in your line of work. It's important to collect all relevant evidence. So you know when they're doing this, that they're about to say that you weren't thorough, that you didn't collect something you were supposed to collect, right? You're like sitting there like your heart is pounding fast. You're like, oh God, what did I forget to do? Crap. Don't worry about it. This is fine. You'll just say yes, yes, yes. Because you're not gonna quarrel with that. Yes, it's important to be thorough. And to collect all relevant evidence. Yes. If it is something you didn't do that's important, you'll get the chance to explain it. Might not be right then, it might be on redirect, but you don't need to like force it out at that point. You could if you have the chance. If you have the chance, I like it when a witness kind of handles it, but not in a defensive way. So if it's going to be defensive, just wait and I'll clean it up on redirect. Here's something that, what'd you say?
Didn't try to tell her,
Yeah.
because yes, why didn't you rent out?
Yeah, they'll do stuff like that. So they know that didn't happen and they'll say that. So at what point did you submit this for testing and you didn't do it, right? They know that. They're gonna have this moment, but you handled it like what you just explained, you handled it like super well. So that's, I mean, and again, knowing the law, that goes back to that point of knowing the law. You know the law, you know where the line is and when you did need to Mirandize someone. And you can't stop someone from making spontaneous utterances, which is what that was. It was she in custody? So Miranda doesn't apply at all. She was with EMS. Okay. So she's custodial and there's no interrogation. So Miranda doesn't, you need both of those things for Miranda to be necessary. So we would come back maybe on redirect and even clean that up more. Here's the thing that is a real basic 101. In fact, I talked to my little law students about this last night. What you want to do on cross is get that witness into a pattern where they're barely even listening to your question anymore. They're just going to be like, yes, 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 yes. And you've almost gotten them into a trance of just yes, yes, yes. Watch yourself with that. Because I literally have seen police officers who want to get off the stand so bad, they're so sick of being up there, that they would just keep on saying yes to anything just to get out of there. That's the vibe I get at least. They're not really listening to the question. They're not maybe putting extra stuff in there to explain things. I said earlier, if it might be misleading to the jury to just answer yes or just answer no. It's not meant for you to have just yes, 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 yes. It is meant that way for the defense. That's what they're trying to get you to do. Here's something that I've seen, like Josh, the guy that I showed you earlier, who used to be like my favorite co-counsel on all my cases, and now he went to the dark side. He'll say, all right, I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I'm not trying to trick you with these questions, but they only call for a yes or a no. That's all they call for, okay? Can we agree to that you'll just answer these questions yes or no? And it's really hard for you to be like, no, we can't agree to that. At the time, right, you're going to be like, I'll try. And then you think that's the rule of the court now all of a sudden. That these are only yes or no and you can't say any more. Absolutely not. You're there to tell the truth. They can't put that little rule in place and all of a sudden you can't answer more than yes or no. That's a tactic. That's a strategy that they're using to control you. And so I want you to know that is, now the judge might say, hey, if you can't answer it yes or no, just let me know. And that's fine if the judge tells you to do it. If you pause a little bit during some of those things and just say to the judge, I'm so sorry, I can't answer that yes or no without misleading the jury. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to answer that question yes or no without misleading the jury. How beautiful is that? Now, if they're like, I need a yes or no, then the jury's like, oh, they're okay with misleading us? No. So you don't always have to answer yes or no. And that was my next slide, apparently, or my next little bullet point. They will get you to think that is the law of the land and you can only answer yes or no. So just be aware of that. A big one, if they're doing this, we're on pretty good footing. If they're looking at like, hey, you forgot to cross a T and dot an I in your report, do you realize that? And you're saying that you have an attention to detail. If they're calling you out on little tiny things, it's like, okay, that's all you got? Good, we're good. So just answer it. Yeah, you're right. That was a typo. I should have corrected that. That's accurate. That's a typo. Just admit it. Here's just an example of this would probably not be for fire investigators, but it's like let's say just a regular patrol officer, how they might do this. Something that you didn't put in your report. So something that you didn't put in your report will be shoved up your all the time. Okay. If you didn't put in your report, it's as good as it didn't happen. In fact, we have had some judges lately say that if the officer didn't put it in their report, then they are going to find that it didn't happen. So you got to think about that. Everything that's important should probably be in your report. I mean, and probably more than everything that's important, like everything that's like slightly important, like kind of important. Right. Okay. Right. Very good point. Those are the things that I mean, it'd be really beautiful if you had that in your report. Because you're going to have to, some of those things at least, because you're going to have to explain what you didn't do. What you didn't do, but also what's not in your report. So this example is what's not in your report. Detective, you just testified in direct that Ms. Jones was crying and upset when you contacted her, correct? And in fact, just now you testified that she was, quote, hysterical when you contacted her. You prepared an official police report in this case, didn't you? In fact, you began preparing that police report the very same day you contacted Ms. Jones, right? On direct, you testified that you've been at Metro for 10 years, and you, like any other police officer, began your career by attending the academy. You took courses devoted to preparation of police reports. You learned to write a report. You learned what to include in the report. You would agree with me that it's important to be thorough in police reports. It's important to be complete, to include all important details. Okay, primrose path. In your mind, you're going like, what did I not put in there, right? You learned that in the academy. And you agree with that, right? In writing this report, you were thorough, you were complete, and you were careful to record all important facts in that report, right? And I was provided with your report as a part of the lead up to this case. You have no idea. I mean, you assume so, but you have no idea, but they'll ask it anyway. Do you have a copy of it here with you today? Please take a look at it right now and tell us, where in that report does it say that Ms. Jones was hysterical when you contacted her? I mean, that's so minor and stupid, right? It's just a characterization of upset. But this is the kind of thing that they'll do, and you'll be like, it's not in there. Oh, so this is the first time today that we're hearing that she was hysterical. You'd agree with me that that's a pretty intense term, hysterical. And yet you didn't write anything about that in your report. Well, then please tell us in the report where it says she's crying and upset. It's not there. So today's the first time. And that is what they're going to do with every little thing that's not in your report. So it's important for you probably to think about that when you're writing your report. I think writing your report can solve probably like 90% of your problems in your examinations and in cross. There are studies on juries, and these are like fake, like mock. They'll do like a mock trial, and then they'll interview the juries afterwards about like the different attorneys and how things went. And I'm not really saying you have to be these things, but I want you to know what comes off well to a jury generally with witnesses. And this is not just law enforcement witnesses, this is witnesses in general. Honest, open, direct, pleasant, helpful, concerned for others, modest, understanding, direct, and to the point. So you said like humble, confident yet humble. That would be something that would be probably make a jury like you. What they don't like is things that we should probably avoid. Whiners, complainers, people who are secretive, evasive, mean, argumentative, rude, indifferent, revengeful, selfish, egotistical, sarcastic, which is one that I've seen law enforcement do before. Exaggerators, dramatic, arrogant, angry. Those are things that a jury doesn't necessarily like. That's not a good vibe for a jury. So again, like I'm not saying these, you have to conform yourself into this other person when you take the stand, but keep that in mind for how it's going to come off. Okay, this goes back to the point that we were just made over here with the blue shirt. Follow all leads and write all of that stuff in the report. We don't want to just like think we saw something and that's it and that's what we found and we're done. We have to explain why all leads don't other leads aren't the actual lead. So this is more geared toward investigations for detectives, but you can kind of consider this as anecdotally or analogous to some of your things. So if there's random information that the detective receives, it seems like BS, maybe that would happen with you. You get a Crime Stopper tip, seems BS, still got to explain how you precluded that from being part of your investigation. How do you know that's BS? You can't just be like, oh, it sounded kind of bogus. No, we got to actually look into it and show how you looked into it and determine that it wasn't actually credible. If somebody talks about another suspect or some other, maybe another way that the fire was started, that you hear from interviewing witnesses. You gotta, even though it seems like lame and you're like, yeah, that's not what it was, you gotta explain why. You can't just abandon that and be like, yeah, that was not what it was. You gotta explain that. How'd you eliminate that? You're gonna have to articulate it on the stand, so you might as well articulate it in your report. What did you do with that information? And document it so you know years later what that was. So your good testimony is going to begin with your report and your investigation and making sure that you're very thorough with that. If you aren't going to do something, like aren't going to send something for testing, aren't going to kind of explain why the source was this and not that, then you're going to have to explain why. You're going to have to articulate that on the stand, so be ready for that. Here's some examples. Didn't request processing of an item, didn't follow up with a certain witness, didn't get the surveillance tape from every store in the area, didn't canvass the homeowners in the area, didn't follow up on a lead, photograph something, preserve something, collect something, get a phone. I don't know if you guys do, if your investigations, okay, this is huge now. Phones are everything. Phone records, a buckle on alternative suspect, follow up with requesting testing after you get some kind of a hit, like that requires additional testing. We have seen, like I said in this presentation, an uptick of the defense. Entire defense isn't even that the guy didn't do it, it's that the cops suck. And it's getting play. So we had one recently that was a not guilty where the closing argument, the first slide up there is the top 10 things that Detective Smith, or whoever it was, didn't do. So it turns into an attack on the detective instead of a explanation of how the state didn't prove this beyond a reasonable doubt and my guy didn't do it. And that's getting a lot of play. And so we need all of these things in our investigations. We're getting with some of our most talented investigators and some of our most talented attorneys, we're seeing an increase in not guilties. And it's, I think, because this this theme in defenses in these cases is getting a lot of traction, and jurors are kind of like buying it. So we have to be careful with this and just prepare ourselves for the eventual trial where some of these things are going to happen. Okay, so in summary, all of these things are things that we talked about today to think about when you are going to testify. Here's just a little snapshot of the resources that I sent to Kevin to send to you so you can read them in the future. And I would really be happy to answer any questions in the future if you guys are about to testify and you can't get a hold of someone even, or you're just like, hey, could you please give me your 2 cents on this? I love this stuff. I'm happy to chat in the future. It was really fun hanging out with you guys today. If nobody's thanked you today, I thank you for your service to this community. I appreciate you. Yeah. We have mock trials with I can do a mock if you guys wanted to put together a mock trial practice.